A man changes his Wi-Fi password, prompting his neighbor to call 911. But when the police arrive, they uncover something far more unsettling. Darius Coleman was a man who valued his privacy. Working from home, keeping his yard tidy, and limiting interactions with neighbors suited him perfectly. Most people left him alone, just the way he preferred, until one seemingly harmless decision put him under scrutiny. It all began on a quiet Thursday afternoon in Crestwood, Missouri. After a long morning of work, Darius decided to check his internet speed, which had been frustratingly slow. Video calls lagged, music streams stuttered, something felt off. Initially, he blamed his service provider, but a deeper look into his router settings revealed an unfamiliar device connected to his network. It wasn't just a string of random numbers and letters. It had been deliberately labeled Crestwood_I01. That was odd. Darius lived alone and only had a few devices connected: his phone, laptop, and TV. He wasn't the type to share his Wi-Fi password. So, who was using his internet? Irritated, he immediately removed all unauthorized devices and reset his password. Stepping outside for better reception, he leaned against the side of his house, entering the new credentials. That's when Melanie Foster spotted him from her kitchen window. To her, Darius standing in his driveway, focused on his phone, looked suspicious. She had never trusted him, not for any real reason, but simply because he kept to himself. He skipped block parties, rarely made small talk, and now, here he was, typing away like he was up to something shady. Her mind raced to the worst conclusion: hacking. She had no idea what or why, but something about it felt wrong. Acting on instinct, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Yes, I need to report something suspicious. My neighbor, he's outside, doing something on his phone. I don't know what, but it doesn't look right. Can you send someone to check it out? The dispatcher asked questions, but Melanie had no real answers. She just kept repeating the same thing: he's up to something. I just know it. Police were dispatched completely unaware that the real threat had nothing to do with Darius. Darius had just finished updating his password when the sound of sirens caught his attention. At first, he assumed they were headed elsewhere, until a squad car slowed to a stop in front of his house. Two officers stepped out. The taller one, Detective Louis Navarro, had sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. His partner, Officer Belcarter, was smaller but exuded quiet authority. Darius exhaled slowly. Here we go. Navarro approached, resting a hand near his belt. Not on his gun, but close enough to send a message. Sir, we received a report of suspicious activity. Mind telling us what you're doing? Darius frowned. Suspicious activity. He was standing in his own driveway. I'm changing my Wi-Fi password, he replied evenly, keeping his tone calm. He knew how quickly situations like this could escalate. Navarro exchanged a glance with Carter before asking, Do you live here? Darius almost laughed. His car was in the driveway. His name was on the mailbox. What kind of question was that? Yeah, he said, folding his arms. 3 years. Before the officers could respond, another voice cut through the air. He's lying. Darius turned. Melanie Foster stood on her porch, arms crossed, her eyes locked on him like a self-appointed neighborhood watch. He's always outside, messing with his phone, looking around like he's watching people. And now, he's been standing in that same spot for 10 minutes, just tapping away. Darius stared at Melanie, disbelief flashing across his face. Was she serious? I was checking my router settings, he said flatly. Because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi. Melanie scoffed. Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that. Navarro turned to her, his tone firm. Ma'am, do you have any actual evidence that Mr. Coleman has done something illegal? Melanie hesitated. Of course, she didn't. She just felt something was off. I don't know, she admitted. I just think you should check. Navarro exhaled sharply, patience wearing thin. He turned back to Darius. Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings? Just to clear this up. Darius clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything, but he also knew how quickly these situations could escalate. Fine, he muttered, unlocking his phone and pulling up the settings. Here, take a look. Navarro leaned in, scanning the list of connected devices. Then his expression shifted, because there it was, Crestwood_I01. Who owns that device? Navarro asked. Darius shook his head. Not me. Officer Carter stepped closer, brows furrowed. So someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission. Darius nodded. And I don't think they were just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs. It's been active nonstop. Someone's been watching. Navarro straightened, his posture suddenly more alert. This wasn't just a petty neighbor dispute anymore. From her porch, Melanie shifted uncomfortably. Wait, what do you mean, watching? Darius turned to her, his gaze cold. I mean, someone has been spying, and they might be watching all of us. A heavy silence settled over the yard. The weight of his words hung in the air. Melanie, so sure she was in the right, suddenly felt uneasy. Spying? That wasn't what she expected to hear. Navarro's voice hardened. All right, let's get inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. Darius didn't argue. He led the officers into his home, his frustrations simmering beneath the surface. He had done nothing wrong, yet here he was being treated like a suspect in his own house. Melanie hesitated before following. She wasn't sure why, but something told her she needed to hear this. Inside, Darius placed his phone on the dining table and mirrored the router settings onto his laptop screen. The list of connected devices popped up. Crestwood _I01 was still there. Still active. Officer Carter leaned in. Can you tell what kind of device it is? Darius clicked through the logs, his fingers moving quickly. Not exactly, but he stopped mid-sentence, his face suddenly tense. Navarro noticed the shift. What is it? Darius swallowed hard. It's been accessing camera feeds. The room went dead silent. Melanie blinked. I don't understand. What camera feeds? Darius turned his laptop around. Mine. On the screen, a live feed of his own home security cameras flickered. Someone had been logging in. Watching. Officer Carter's expression darkened. You're telling me someone has been spying on you through your own security system? Darius let out a sharp breath. That's exactly what I'm saying. Then his stomach twisted, because as he scrolled further, he realized it wasn't just his cameras. His security system had flagged multiple IP addresses. Some belonged to his network, but others came from different homes. Oh, this is bad, he murmured. Navarro leaned closer. What do you mean? Darius tapped the screen. Whoever's behind this isn't just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood. Melanie stumbled back. No, that can't be right. Darius turned to her. You sure about that? He clicked another log. A new feed opened. A dimly lit hallway. A living room. A bedroom. Melanie gasped. Wait. Darius didn't even need to ask. He recognized the layout immediately. That's your house. Melanie pressed a hand to her mouth, color draining from her face. Navarro's voice was sharp. How the hell is this happening? Darius gritted his teeth. If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake Wi-Fi network. A signal that looks like a normal connection. People connect to it without realizing, and once they do, their devices get compromised. Carter's expression hardened. A man-in-the-middle attack. Darius nodded. Exactly. Melanie's voice shook. So you're saying someone's been watching me? My family. Darius met her gaze. That's exactly what I'm saying. She sank into a chair, hands trembling. Oh my God. Navarro's jaw tightened. All right. We need to find out who's behind this. And fast. But what none of them knew was that the culprit was far closer than they realized. Navarro wasted no time. He grabbed his radio, calling in for cybercrime support. This is bigger than we thought, he muttered to Carter. If someone's running a surveillance network, they're not just invading privacy, they're committing a felony. Carter nodded, her face grim. If we don't stop them now, who knows how far they've already gone? Darius, still seated at his laptop, was already working. He wasn't a hacker, but he knew enough to trace where the data was being sent. He pulled up the IP logs and froze. Wait, this can't be right. Navarro looked up. What? Darius turned his laptop so they could see. The data isn't going to some random server. It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Melanie's eyes widened. You mean someone close by is behind this? Darius nodded. It's coming from a house just a few doors down. Navarro's expression darkened. Can you pinpoint exactly which one? Darius worked quickly, cross-referencing connection logs with signal strength. Within minutes, he had a match. His stomach dropped. He recognized the address. So did Melanie. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's... Darius cut her off, his voice ice cold. That's Brandon's house. Melanie's nephew, Brandon Foster. A 22-year-old college student who had moved in with her a few months ago. Quiet, always on his computer, rarely socialized. And suddenly, everything started making sense. Melanie's face went pale. No, that doesn't make any sense. Brandon isn't, he wouldn't. Carter stepped forward. We need to talk to him. Now. Melanie hesitated. She didn't want to believe it. But deep down, something told her it was true. I'll take you to him, she murmured. Darius stood. I'm coming too. Navarro gave him a sharp look. No. You stay here. Let us handle this. Darius clenched his jaw, frustrated that he had to stay back while he was the one who uncovered everything. But he knew pushing wouldn't help. Fine, he muttered. Just make sure you get the truth out of him. But the truth turned out to be worse than they expected. Melanie's hands trembled as she led Navarro and Carter down the street to her house. Every step felt heavier. Brandon, the boy she had raised, supported through school, couldn't be responsible for this. And yet, a nagging voice in her mind whispered, what if he is? She pushed open the front door. Brandon, can you come downstairs for a minute? She called. Silence. Navarro exchanged a glance with Carter before stepping inside. We're going up. Melanie didn't protest. She just hugged herself, trying to steady her breathing. They climbed the stairs and stopped at Brandon's door. It was shut. No sound from inside. Navarro knocked firmly. Brandon, this is the police. We need to talk. Still no response. Then, movement. The scrape of a chair. Footsteps. Carter's hand hovered near her gun. Open the door. Now. Slowly the knob turned. The door creaked open to reveal Brandon Foster. His eyes flicked nervously between Navarro, Carter, and Melanie. His hands fidgeted at his sides. What's going on? He asked, voice tight. Navarro studied him. We have evidence linking you to unauthorized access of private security cameras in the neighborhood. Care to explain? Brandon barely reacted, but his fingers twitched slightly, as if gripping something invisible. That's ridiculous, he scoffed. I have no idea what you're talking about. Carter wasn't convinced. Mind if we check your laptop? Brandon's jaw tensed. You don't have a warrant. Navarro took a step closer. We can get one. But right now, we're giving you a chance to come clean before this gets worse. A long, tense silence followed. Then Brandon sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, Navarro cut him off. Then explain why your IP address is linked to a network breach affecting multiple homes. Brandon froze. Melanie's voice broke. Brandon, tell me you're not involved in this. His eyes flicked to her, and for the first time, his mask slipped. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he muttered. It started as a joke, I just wanted to see if I could break into someone's Wi-Fi, just to mess around, Brandon admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Navarro's tone sharpened. So you admit you hacked into the network? Brandon hesitated. Then, after a long moment, he gave a small nod. Melanie's breath hitched. Brandon continued, his words spilling out faster now. It was supposed to be a joke. But then, I saw the security cameras. And I got curious. Carter's eyes narrowed. Curious? Or obsessed? Brandon didn't answer. Navarro's patience snapped. How many people have you watched? Silence. Then, in a small, broken voice, Brandon murmured, I don't know. Melanie staggered back. Oh my God. Brandon finally looked at her, and for the first time, real regret flashed across his face. I swear, I wasn't hurting anyone, he pleaded. Navarro cut him off. Brandon Foster, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance. Brandon's face drained of color. Wait, no. Carter was already reaching for her handcuffs. Melanie turned away, pressing her hands to her face as tears welled up. Darius had been right all along. And the worst part, she had called the cops on him, while the real threat had been inside her house the whole time. But this wasn't over. Brandon didn't resist. He stood still, his wrists bound in cuffs, staring down at the ground as Navarro read him his rights. It was over. Melanie's breaths came in short, uneven bursts. She couldn't even bring herself to look at him. This was her nephew. The boy she had raised, supported, fed. And yet, he had been violating the privacy of their entire neighborhood. Navarro guided Brandon toward the door, but before stepping outside, he paused and turned toward Darius, who had been watching silently from the sidewalk. You were right, Navarro admitted. If you hadn't caught this, we might never have known. Darius didn't reply at first. He let out a slow, steady breath, his gaze shifting between Brandon and Melanie. Then finally he spoke. You know what's crazy? His voice was calm, but there was weight behind his words. I was out here minding my business, just changing my own Wi-Fi password. And yet somehow, I was the one who got the cops called on me. Melanie flinched. There was no excuse. No defense. I was wrong, she murmured. I made an assumption, and it was completely unfair. Darius let that hang in the air for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he turned toward his house. I don't need an apology, he said over his shoulder. Just do better. And with that, he walked inside. Navarro and Carter exchanged a look before leading Brandon toward the patrol car. Melanie remained where she was, standing alone in the middle of the street. The truth had been right in front of her all along. But she had been too focused on the wrong person. And that mistake, it would haunt her for a long, long time.